It's time. Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Pilar Marrero, Associate Editor of ACOM, and your moderators for today's discussion. Welcome to our weekly national briefing. Today, we are examining a profound shift in U.S. immigration policy. How the Trump administration is taking groups of immigrants who have lived here legally, some for years or decades, and finding a way to reclassifying them as unauthorized or taking away status from people. These include DACA recipients, TPS holders, humanitarian parole beneficiaries from Cuba, Venezuela, Ukraine, Afghanistan, and others. Through executive action, DHS policy changes, and new litigation positions, the administration is effectively canceling the lawful status of entire communities, or at least attempting to. More than 2 million people nationwide could be, in the end, included in this if it goes fully through. This fundamentally reshapes what legal immigration means in the United States. We invite reporters to post their questions in the chat, and we'll take as many as we can. But we're going to have a different format today. We're going to have Q&A instead of presentation. So we're gonna go to the different panelists and have and have questions for them, and then next panelist, etc. So you can just start posting your questions as soon as you want. Our panelists today are Hiroshi Motomura. He's co-director of the UCLA Center for Immigration Law and Policy. Adelis Ferro, she's executive director of the Venezuelan American Caucus. Laura Flores Perilla, she's a staff attorney at the Justice Action Center. Jeremiah Johnson, he's a former immigration judge and recently elected vice president of the National Association of Immigration Judges. And we have Andrea, a dreamer and DACA activist. She will only be identified by her first name and will keep her camera off to protect her identity, for obvious reasons. Okay, let's just dive right in. And I want to start with Professor Motomura, Hiroshi. Let's start with a general question. How is the administration redefining what it means to be in the country legally?
Well, that's a very important question. And this involves, as you suggested in your opening remarks, taking status away from non-citizens who have lawful status today. So they have it today, and they won't have it tomorrow or some point in the future if the administration gets what it wants. I think the first thing to understand is that U.S. law has many different lawful immigration statuses. There's, of course, citizenship. There's lawful permanent residence, or what some people call a green card. But it also has many statuses that I think sometimes people call in between, but they're not long-term lawful statuses, but they come with work permits, and these statuses are definitely lawful. And many people in these statuses are in the process of applying for a green card or a long-term status. So you name some of the examples: temporary protected status, rescissions, not just expiring to temporary protected status, which is a form of humanitarian protection, but also taking it away. Another is a status called parole, which is permission to be in the country, either taking that away or having it expire. It remains to be seen what will happen with deferred action for childhood arrivals, or DACA. These are all statuses that are lawful, but this is the focus of the administration's efforts. I should also mention that the administration has announced a re-examining and possibly taking away status from durable status, or taking away green card status, lawful permanent resident status that has already been granted. This may be especially based on asylum and refugee admissions, asylum grants and refugee admissions. In other words, you get a green card, you're on a path to a green card, but the administration wants to re-examine this. The administration's also quite intent on denaturalization of citizens. In other words, people become citizens, they come as immigrants, they become citizens, to take that away, looking back into past cases. And we don't know what the patterns will be. I should also mention two other things. I know there's a lot to cover here today, but let me mention two other things. One is the administration has announced its attempt to redefine what it means to be a U.S. citizen. So we can talk about lawful statuses being taken away, even green cards taken away. But the executive order that the administration issued earlier in 2025 would actually take citizenship away from people unless they had, traditionally U.S. citizenship is based on birth on U.S. soil, and this would require you to have either a citizen parent or a lawful permanent resident parent. The administration has said that this will only apply into the future, but actually, the executive order would redefine citizenship for all time. And so, in that respect, if that is approved, that's going to take citizenship away from many people who have it today. So that's, believe it or not, the short answer. I'd be happy to follow up.
Um, One of the recent announcements by the administration is being referred to by one of our reporters, and I'm going to take her question, Fatma Bakit. And it's the case of, what happened after the Afghan individual who actually worked with the United States in Afghanistan, trained by the CIA there, who is now a refugee in the United States, opened fire and killed a National Guard member in DC and hurt another. And then after that, the president announced, the administration announced a couple of things, but one of the things that was announced was suspension of all processes of immigration for 19 countries, of which, Venezuela is one of them, my country of birth. What does this mean? He's stopping like green card cases? What does this mean for people,
Well, I
Professor?
think one of the things, the practical thing is that a lot of processes that people have been counting on that they're actually legally entitled to are being stopped. And so it remains to be seen how lawful this is. There are aspects of the announcements that I think strongly reflect religious and racial discrimination. But the administration will cite national security. So I think that will be fought in the courts. I think that another thing is that people are not going to apply for things. So the practical effect of this is much broader than the legal effect. I think what the administration's been doing in much broader perspective is they're making some people feel they belong and some people feel they don't belong. So there are people who are afraid to travel. There are people who qualify to become citizens, but I know people who are afraid to apply for naturalization. They're afraid to speak out. There are many things going on here that are. I think it does mean that there's a pause on actually people getting benefits, but I think that a lot of the administration's intent in this situation is to scare people and to make them feel not welcome. More to say about that, but that's the beginning of an answer.
Yeah. Okay. So I would imagine that there's some precedent to this. I remember in the history of the United States, there was, the Chinese Exclusion Act and, excluding people based on where they come from. So we're going back to that. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, if you look at this in historical perspective, a couple of things to say about that. One is that the immigration system of the United States has been operating in this very informal way for generations. You can come to the country lawfully, but those ways are very narrow, and so the system has tolerated and invited people to come to work undocumented. But they've also had a lot of these statuses that are like temporary protected status or parole. I think the administration is trying to say that those are all illegitimate in some way, but in fact, they've been part of the U.S. immigration system for generations, certainly going back to the end of World War II, and really even beyond. That's one thing to say. In terms of historical perspective, I think the intensity that we are seeing out of this administration is unprecedented because it is doing exactly what this webinar is about. It's going after people who already have lawful status. So the system changed in 1965 to become much more, at least on the appearance of it, neutral. I think it's not totally as neutral as people think, but it's a neutral system compared to what before. But there's a strong sense that the administration wants to, at least my interpretation is the administration wants to turn back the clock to a period around 1900. In other words, to return to a system that was much more focused on European immigrants and preferring European immigrants. And so that I think is driving the intensity of the efforts by the administration now. Strong sense of that we're being invaded. The word invasion appears in many, many of the documents, including the presidential executive orders. I think previous administrations have been intent on slowing down the change, the demographic change in America. But I think this administration wants to turn back the clock to the year 1900, as if the 20th century didn't happen. And this has led to much more aggressive measures than we have seen historically.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on to another panelist, but we're gonna come back, so stay around. I'm going to move on to Laura Flores Perilla. She works with the Justice Action Center. The center is involved in a number of litigation, a number of lawsuits against the administration's immigration policies. And Laura, can you talk a little bit about the situation of people who have humanitarian parole, including the CHNV parolees, and explain for those who may not be familiar with that, what it means and how it worked until now?
Sure. Thank you, Pilar. So parole has been a tool that administrations from both sides of the aisle have used for the past 7 decades to not only provide a legal and safe pathway to the United States, but to also provide individuals with the ability to work in the United States in response to grave humanitarian crises that are happening in other countries. I think folks are familiar with the CHNV parole program for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans that came about under the Biden administration, but there are many more, like Uniting for Ukraine, Operation Allies Welcome, and others as well. And on the second day of Trump's second term, he, announced his intent to terminate humanitarian parole, specifically targeting the CHNV program, but also just parole in general. And this is all part of the Trump administration's campaign to delegalize and strip as many people who do have lawful status as possible, and to make them vulnerable, even more so to things like deportation and removal. And that's what we're fighting for in one of our cases, Svetlana Doe versus Noam, for parole recipients who, have lawful status, and did everything that the federal government asked of them in terms of applying for parole and being eligible for parole, and are now having the rug essentially pulled out from under them and stripping them of revoking their parole status. And this is unprecedented and cruel. And so that's what we're working on in that litigation, and it's just, another example of this unprecedented mass delegalization that's happening with for folks in the United States who have lawful status like parole.
Yeah. So in one of the cases, I don't know if it's in the one that you just mentioned, you are challenging the application of expedited removal of these people that are here legally, came in with these programs, meaning they wouldn't be able to fight their case, they wouldn't be able to defend themselves, they would just be shipped out. Has this started to happen yet? Have people started to be sent out already from these cases?
It's certainly started, and that's in regards to our other lawsuit, Charla versus Noam, in which the administration began targeting individuals who have parole, whether that's humanitarian parole or CBP-1, asylum seekers who entered the country on CBP-1 parole, essentially for these individuals who may have other avenues for relief and who are attending immigration court hearings. We think heard in the news like several months ago that these individuals attending these hearings would have their case dismissed, and then ICE would round them up and detain them and subject them to this process, fast track deportation process called expedited removal. And so that's what that case is about. And it does center on individuals who entered on parole and them being subjected to this fast-track deportation process that doesn't have any due process built into it or an ability to fight your case because it happens so quickly, the deportation process, and how these paroled individuals are not, by the law, are not supposed to be subject to this process, this fast-track expedited removal process. And so this is just another way of subjecting these individuals, not only delegalizing them, but subjecting them to deportation in an expedited way. And fortunately, in that case, we were able to secure a win temporarily where the court agreed with us and blocked the administration's policies that they were relying on to subject paroled individuals to expedited removal. And since then, we've seen a number of parolees no longer be subject to expedited removal. We've seen these numbers go down. However, in some ways, it's still continuing to be an issue in terms of the government seeking other ways to subject these individuals to this process. But fortunately, despite that, with advocacy from individuals and their attorneys, we've been able to see these numbers go down and there be a measurable difference since that case has been filed.
So we can say that the legal system is still working at this point.
I would say so, although there's still much work to be done in terms of securing a more permanent form of relief on this issue and in our other parole case as well. But it's important to also secure those preliminary reliefs and hopefully have those make some sort of difference in protecting our communities in the meantime while litigation goes on.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. Stay around. We're going to move on to another panelist. And I want to invite Adelis Ferro. Adelis, she's a Venezuelan activist from the Venezuelan American Caucus. Adelis, welcome. Are you there?
Yes. Hi.
Okay, welcome. Adelis, Venezuelan families have endured years of shifting policies, TPS, humanitarian parole, and now the threat of losing both. What are you hearing in the community today?
Before answering your question, I would like to let everyone know that the U.S. Supreme Court just agrees to hear the case challenging birthright citizenship. Just talking about Mr. Motomura was talking about the 1900s, etc. So now answering your question, what I am hearing. What I am hearing is over and over, every single day is terror, fear, exhaustion, and betrayal. Venezuelan families have spent years doing everything this country asks for them. Not only Venezuelan families, every single immigrant family, but speaking about Venezuelans, they register for TPS, they apply for work permits, they show it up to court, they pay their taxes, they build small businesses. Their kids are in our schools, churches, universities. And now they are being told that overnight, 600,000 lives could go back to zero. About TPS, people describe it as living in permanent temporary status. Every announcement, every court decision, every headline can change their future in a second. And that's the way it has been happening so far. In our WhatsApp groups, our hotline, our community meetings, the messages are all the same. What's going to happen to my children if I lose my work permit? Should I stop driving because I am afraid of being pulled over? Is it safer to move, to disappear? What is going to happen with my children if I get detained? What is going to happen with my US-born children if I get detained? There is also a deep sense of unfairness. Venezuelans are fleeing a dictatorship, as you all know. Political persecution, hunger, and now even the threat of war. And yet they're treated as if they were a danger instead of people escaping danger. This is where we are. Our families feel like they are being used as political bargaining chips for months now, actually for years, but more than ever before in 2025. One day we were welcome in the United States, the next day we are disposable. So the mood right now is a mix of fear, fatigue, and a very quiet but strong determination not to give up and to fight for their rights. And we will stay with them every single step during this fight.
Thank you, Delis. Do you have any, can you give us a little update on what's going on with the TPS cases that you're watching, the concerns Venezuelans?
Well, right now, the actual TPS lawsuit, which, by the way, is led by the CILP
Yes.
and ACLU, NorCal and SouthCal, is in the 9th Circuit Appeals Court, and we know it's going to take a while until we have an answer from them. But because of the decision of the Supreme Court, the latest decision granting the state to the government, no matter what happened on the appeal courts, has to go to the Supreme Court right after. So sadly, we can have a decision even after October 2026, which was the deadline for the extension that the Biden administration gave to the Venezuelan community. In the other hand, right now, in actually almost half an hour, we will have another hearing in a district court in San Francisco, Judge Chen Court, where our lawyers, our amazing lawyers, are presenting a new filing, trying something different to see if there is a chance to protect as many Venezuelans with TPS as possible from deportation and to protect their work permits. So that's going to happen in half an hour. We're going to start that process. And we are looking for different ways to support them, to help them, especially giving them as much information as possible, because that's the most important resource that they can have right now.
Thank you, Delis. I don't want to...
No, really quick. I just want to tell all of your community. The worst part of the Venezuelan crisis in the United States is that we don't have a consulate in the United States. We don't have an embassy. We don't have a political representation. So even if people want to leave or self-deported, we don't have passports. We don't have IDs. Many of them don't have anything that identify them as Venezuelans. So even if they want to leave, it is a complete mess trying to do it. I just wanted to say that too.
Yes. It's good for people to know this. Thank you, Adelis. I don't want to pass the opportunity to react to this breaking news. Hiroshi, would you react? Supreme Court agrees to review Trump order restricting birthright citizenship. The administration asked the justice to uphold an executive order ending birthright citizenship after lower courts ruled it violated the Constitution. Can you react to this?
Well, I'm not surprised that the Supreme Court took the case. I think it's a very important case. That's first reaction. The second is that changing the reading of U.S. citizenship would be by far the biggest thing, the most radical thing that this court could do. So if you ask me to, I'm not sure I can predict anything, but I'm more confident that that citizenship law, as it exists today, will survive. But in this administration, or I should say this court, and maybe to some extent those that are politically very similar to at least some of the Supreme Court, I'm just not sure. I think the Supreme Court has a way out of this because the U.S. statutes, so we have the Constitution, it defines citizenship. That's what the contest is about in the Supreme Court. But the United States Congress has enacted many laws that rely on the traditional interpretation of U.S. citizenship. And so it may be that the executive order, we have to remember the executive order is only from the president, and so it cannot override what Congress does. And so in my view, we have both the Constitution and the statute here in favor of what I'm calling the traditional interpretation. But that traditional interpretation is that anyone born on U.S. soil is a U.S. citizen, with the narrow
Yeah.
exception of a few senior diplomatic personnel, as if they have children. And so I think that, so I have more confidence in the Supreme Court deciding to uphold the longstanding interpretation of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. I have much more confidence in the U.S. Supreme Court upholding that than I do with regard to any other case that the Supreme Court has. But here's this is I just want to say one more thing, and it goes back to what several people have already addressed. I guess including me, is that I think a lot of what the administration is trying to do is to send a message about who belongs and who doesn't belong. For every person who is arrested, there are many people who fear arrest. And so even attempting to redefine citizenship definitely sends a message that some people belong and some people don't. And that's the political context in which the administration is conducting its campaign. It's not just to win in court, but to score political points, which has two facets. One is to send a message to people who, in their view, don't really belong, and the other is to consolidate its support among the people that favor it.
Yes. Thank you so much. I want to welcome Judge Jeremiah Johnson. Judge Johnson was an immigration judge in San Francisco until recently. He was let go of that position. He's not the only one. The administration has been purging the immigration courts of certain judges and announcing that they will look for deportation judges. So, Judge Johnson, thank you for being with us. How does your removal from the bench fit into the broader restructuring of immigration courts under this administration?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I think my removal not only fits with the broader pattern of removal from judges, but in what we were talking about before, I see the similarities of illegality to or legality to illegality. A number of things that my co-presenters have touched on. We're talking about people that used to come to court, and now they're scared to come to court. And so once when they were in a legal status pursuing legal pathways, their failure to appear at court will result in an order of removal, and then all of a sudden they then become illegal. So that legal status that they had, this pending status, I used to call, people would ask me, what status do I have? It's a pending status, you're an asylum seeker. So they no longer have that. And so by removing judges, you remove, that portion that I've fit within. But also by firing judges, you're removing judges. We talked about losing status or re-examining status. I would tell people that you are a lawful permanent resident until I, as a judge, say so. Even if the department were to remove or try to terminate your asylum status, that can be reviewed in front of an immigration court. You always have that ability to have that status reviewed by a judge. But if you remove judges, remove courts, you're removing that process of review. You're turning people that once had legal status into this illegal status. So that with the detentions, that you're placing people in detentions into the expedited removal proceedings, placing them back into a status, reversing the clocks. I heard those were things that were occurring, and that really was a difficult challenge for judges to address. So when you see the judges firing, I think you see the administration trying to circumvent the law, to circumvent judges and courts to just go forward with this program.
Is the administration trying to fill the immigration courts with judges more sympathetic to their political position?
I don't know. They indicated that they're hiring deportation judges. I consider that a false advertisement. If you look at the law, the act says that an immigration judge shall conduct removal proceedings, and outside of the expedited removal proceedings, these immigration court proceedings, immigration court is the venue where a person can either remain in the United States or be removed. And it's not deportation judges or another type of judge. It's an immigration judge conducts those proceedings, does so in a full and fair hearing. So The deportation judges with the bonuses and the all that, it doesn't really address the seriousness that judges take when they approach each case. They're not being filled. The temporary immigration judges, the Attorney General has watered down the requirements for those judges, although there are more judges are needed for sure. And the NIJ welcomes that and would like to see that, wants to see them trained, a merit-based, transparent hiring system program. So I don't think they're replacing it. There's been 100 or so judges fired. Others have left the bench because they've either retired or accepted the fork in the road retirement plan. And we had, I think, 25 replacements so far. My courtroom, the whole floor of San Francisco courtroom is there are empty courthouses, empty hallways, empty courtrooms. So they're not being replaced.
And that means more, I mean, there's always all these backlogs of cases that are growing and growing and growing, and taking judges out are just going to make that to grow even more.
Delay,
right?
cases are wait 4 years, then 4 more years, and then you have people in this pending status. And as the other colleagues have talked about, is that that's being taken away. And then who's going to review that? There are no judges to review that, which leads to detention. And I don't think it's a stretch to see a future where the immigration court or San Francisco immigration court, other courts, larger courts, are dismantled completely. Then you have hundreds of thousands of undocumented persons or people waiting for their status, and the administration just lets them sit in limbo. And when they get their day in court, it will be when ICE goes to arrest them, and then they find themselves in front of a judge or spend months in detention, and then accept an order of removal or voluntary departure because of the conditions that they find themselves in.
So one of the reporters in the chat saying, at court, many judges reported that the DOJ pressured them to deny more asylum applications. This created a sense that judges couldn't act independently anymore. Is that true?
I consider that soft pressure. I never had any directives. Otherwise, I hope I execute. Oh well, I was asked this earlier. Do judges can they still exercise their independent decision-making process? It's in the regulations, it's in the law. Although I was under the Department of Justice, I was hired to and appointed to exercise my independent decision-making. And I did so up until the last day. The number of cases that you hear constrains you a little bit. There's pressure on you to move faster. If you move faster, you might have mistakes. But there are judges who are pausing. There are judges exercising their independent decision-making. But I hope to think I was one of them, but I have now find myself in the former category. So that's that approach. But as Professor indicated, the law is still there, and so I am still optimistic that we have a law that says immigration judges shall conduct these proceedings, and the decision shall be made only on the evidence presented at that hearing and at that proceedings. Unfortunately, the detention, I think, is what's really become a litigation strategy of the Department of Homeland Security.
So this is undermining the justice inside immigration courts.
Undermining or just going around it. Just if you don't have judges, you don't have courts, you have people waiting, and then we see self-removal, deportations. Someone talked about being disappearing inside the country. I mean, that to me is very troubling, that you have people not wanting to seek a legal pathway or scared to do so. And the firing of judges doesn't bode well.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to our last speaker and then go back to questions in the chat. And so we have Andrea. She's a dreamer. Andrea, can you please talk a little bit about your story with us? What's your personal story?
Thank you so much for having me today. Can you guys hear me well?
Yes. Try to speak slowly for the interpreters, Andrea.
Sounds good. Yes, My name is Andrea. I am a dreamer and immigrant rights organizer. I came to the US when I was 5, so I've been in the country for about 20 years now. I qualified for DACA. I met all the qualifications, and right as I was about to apply, the Trump administration rescinded the program. And then I applied again in 2021 when the applications briefly opened, and my application has been on hold since. So ever since then, I mean, I went to school. I grew up in the DMV area, DC, Maryland, Virginia. I went and got my bachelor's degree, and now I'm currently in grad school getting my master's of science in public policy and management. And I'm right now am like most streamers at a crossroads of what to do next. Where am I going to go? I'm in this sort of what scholars would say liminal status of I'm neither here or there, and trying to figure out what my next steps are.
Yeah. How has this affected your daily life, your sense of stability?
Yeah, I mean, I think this isn't particularly new. The sort of lack of stability that's been going on for years and years. As I want to echo
Sure.
some of the words that Adeli said. You know, we've lived in fear for years, majority of my life, if not all my life. Um, Policies aren't just paper. They shape every part of my day, things that I think most people take for granted, such as renewing your license. And I mean, now with the Real ID, uh, being having that and kind of sort of evokes more discrimination and lack of resources. And as well as just applying for a job, I'm not sure what I'm going to do after I graduate. I mean, I'm very fortunate to be in school and have gotten this far, but there's a lot of dreamers who like to go to school. And, you know, there's states across the country where that's not possible. Uh, I mean, it creates a lot of instability, and we're seeing right now a wave of undocumented individuals who have gone to college, are in college, are going to graduate, if not graduated already, and don't know what to do. They can't work. We don't know. We're being told by the administration to self-deport to a country that we did not grow up in. And like myself, am thinking, should I move to a different country? But ultimately, I've lived here my whole life. I want to contribute to this country. My friends, my family, I've built my entire life here. Every day is different. Every day we're seeing different stories, different policies roll out. I mean, just yesterday, the Dream Act was reintroduced for,
Yes.
I'm not even sure. I mean, this is since 2001, so the
Yes.
probably
It's been
the
25 years. Yeah.
it's practically the amount of time that I've been on this earth. So, you know, every day
Yeah.
is different. Um, I'm just trying to survive, and I just want to be able to live my life, but how having this looming threat over my head and feeling persecuted. And I mean, now more than ever under this administration, that has become very clear that we are under threat, regardless of whether you have a liminal status or whether you are fully undocumented or whether you are a resident or even now US citizens.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Andrea. Thank you for that. That was very heartfelt, and we appreciate you coming to share your story. I want to go to the chat because there's a lot of questions, and what I'm going to do is just ask the question, and anyone that wants to chime in can do it. Let's see. There's a question by Nestor Fantini. Nestor, you want to ask your question?
Sure. Um, and then let me make it shorter. So,
Please.
should citizens born in the U.S. be concerned that undocumented immigrants are being deported and that naturalized citizens are being threatened with denaturalization? Are U.S. born citizens who disagree with the administration next? And therefore, is Pastor Niemöller's reflection on 1930s Germany still valid? When he said, as we all know that quote, at first they came for the socialists, then for the trade unionists, etc., etc. And when they came for me, there was no one left to speak for me. Thank you.
So what you're saying is there a parallel with 1930s Germany here?
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot. that's been talked about this. Anyone who wants to chime in?
Well, I can start with this. I mean, I think what you're raising is absolutely correct. That there are parallels. I think one of the classic moves, I suppose, of authoritarianism is ultimately to strip citizenship away from people. The next question is, how is that done? Well, the Birthright Citizenship executive order here that the Supreme Court will be looking at, as I mentioned earlier, it says in Section 2 that it only applies into the future, but actually it redefines citizenship basically from the beginning, saying this is what U.S. citizenship is. It means that many, many millions of people in the United States would find themselves outside the zone of citizenship. I don't know what the administration would do to act upon it, but that's, I think that's a real risk. The other thing I should mention is that we've been, and I think your question is directed, as I think it should be, toward legal status and the loss of legal status. That's in keeping with what we're talking about today. But of course, the effects of immigration enforcement touch citizens directly. They may be children with parents who are going to be deported. They may be the employers of people who have TPS and are losing it. They may be other family members. And so there are many direct effects. And there are many people who are a significant number of people are being arrested by immigration enforcement, even though those people who are arrested are U.S. citizens. And there are people who feel that they have to carry their passports, their U.S. passports with them. And so
Yes.
that's also a very significant direct effect. And the last thing I should mention here is that when the Supreme Court let racial profiling take place in Los Angeles, in Los Angeles, when the Supreme Court allowed this to happen, it relied on an older case from the Supreme Court that governed what the government can do at the border. So what the message being sent here is the border is everywhere. Immigration enforcement can be anywhere. And we can basically act in a way that hurts U.S. citizens, at least if they look like they might be from a country against which immigration enforcement is taking place.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to take a question by Elena Kuznetsova. Elena, do you want to ask your question? And I think Laura should be able to answer this. Elena?
Hi, Blair. Thank you.
Hi.
Let me find it.
It's 8
Yeah,
11 p.m.
yeah, got it. There are many questions after my mind.
Yeah, there's so many
Okay.
questions. It's just moved.
Yeah, got it. So the question is, do those legal immigrants who have the right to dispute, do they have the right to dispute their suspension of their legal status since they entered the country legally? Or the only way for them is just to go back to their home countries? And as we heard today, some people simply cannot go there, like people from Venezuela, or, for example, Ukrainians whose houses are just bombed. And are there any law protecting those immigrants who came here legally? Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Laura, can you talk about that?
Sure. Well, we'd argue yes. I mean, for our specific cases regarding parole, at least, the parole authority, which has been used for 70 years, allows individuals to be here on parole status if they meet, the certain eligibility and qualifications and follow the process like parolees who are now in the country have done. So, and the way in which the administration has sought to strip individuals of their lawful status, of their parole status, is unlawful as well. Failure to consider many different things, many important factors and reliance interests and whatnot did not happen. And so we'd argue, yes, that there are laws and there are rights that are being infringed upon with with this mass delegalization effort through parole, but not just through parole, through other lawful statuses like TPS. And so that's, what we're fighting for in our cases. And it's just another example of why we need to continue to fight. The administration is coming for immigrants in general from all angles, from the courts, for judges, and for obviously individuals who have status, who don't have status. And it's, the fear is definitely there. The exhaustion is definitely there, like Adelis mentioned, but we need to continue to just fight back through the courts and through our communities. And while there's, the hope might be quiet and might be tired, it's still strong and it's still there, and we need to continue to do that and fight against this clear message that the administration is sending, like Professor Motomura mentioned earlier, about who belongs and who doesn't. The executive branch doesn't have the right to do that. It's us, it's the American people, and this affects all of us. And so, we just need to keep fighting and moving along, and that's what we intend to do in our litigation, and I know others are as well, especially as new policies come out infringing on individuals' rights like this.
Thank you. There's a question for Adelis Ferro by Carlos. Roa, Carlos, can you ask your question?
Yeah, I'm trying. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Pilar. Hi, Adelis. I would like to know if, since you have been so involved working with so many organizations about the very special and specific Venezuelan issue or issues, at this point, what we would like to know as Venezuelan is some ways to protect Venezuelans to be deported, because deportations are happening, and Venezuelans are being deported to our country, which is extremely dangerous for many of us, or to a third country, which we don't have any relation with. What can we do to protect Venezuelan people in the U.S., since all the legal statuses are being ripped us from our community?
I would love to have the answer for that question. It is really hard to tell you something that we can do to protect them is only give them the information, only give them the resources to contact a lawyer, a good lawyer, not anyone that is offering them some help. Trying to make them understand the possibilities of other immigration benefits they can apply. We have been doing that for months now. But as the situation gets more and more complicated, and every time someone gets detained, there is a mental torture, and we are not talking about that, but they are torturing them. They are making them sign papers on their threats, on their awful things that are happening to them. What is happening in Alligator Alcatraz, as they called this inhumane, the so-called detention center, it is torture. So there is a point when Venezuelan detainees, and not only Venezuelans, said, you know what, I'm going back, and let me go, let me sign, just send me back, because I don't want to suffer anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. So what we can do to protect them right now is what our lawyers are doing, as I said, as they are doing today, trying to look for some other ways to protect them from deportation and to keep them working in the United States until we figure out other ways to help them. But something that can protect them is non-existent, because as the judge says, they are, the Trump administration is going not only, they are not just bypassing laws, but going around and pushing our immigrant community to some extreme, and make them feel like they have no hope. And that's the reason many of them are getting self-deported or planning to leave the country. It is a very, very terrifying situation for many. We got people with very critical and chronic diseases right now. We have people that lost their health insurance because they lost the legal protections. There are so many stories, and sadly, beyond information, beyond support in the way that we talk to them, we listen to them, we give them as much as information about legal resources or other ways they can get the help that they need. There is not that much that we can about we can do, but keep fighting in the courts as much as possible, and staying with them every step of the way.
Thank you, Adelis. I'm going to call on my colleague Sunita Sarachi to ask a question she had in the chat for Judge Jensen.
Thank you, Pilar. Judge Johnson, how does the current detention time compare with previous administrations? For example, I reported stories during the Obama administration of people who had spent more than 3 years at various detention facilities. Can you offer a comparison?
Thank you. I'm not exactly sure I can, because I just see more people in detention facility, and then people are accepting orders of removal or voluntary departure. So my experience at the end of where I was handling cases, I had my non-detained docket, but I was also hearing cases out of Eloy, which is a detention facility in Arizona. People had been detained for probably 3 to 4 months was my experience before they had an individual hearing. So somewhere around that time frame. When I was a practicing attorney before the first Trump administration, a little bit afterwards, there were some what they call the Rodriguez bond, that if someone was detained for longer than 6 months, it was considered prolonged, and then you could get a bond hearing. So right now I don't think we're seeing the long time, because this administration we're seeing more people being detained, but then other countries being selected, and then people being removed to those countries rather than being held in detention. In the past, if a person was not going to be returned to their country because of diplomatic reasons or other reasons that they couldn't go back, they were generally released. I don't see that now. I think the administration is holding people and then finding some country, either through an agreement that's allowed by the law, or simply finding another country that would accept a person.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. There's a question in the chat, and I'm not sure who to address it, but Ziwe Liu, do you want to ask your question about the public charge criteria? Ziwe Liu? Okay, I'm going to ask the question. Many Asian immigrants, including Chinese families applying for green cards, are alarmed by recent proposals to expand the public charge criteria. Combined with broader efforts that have pushed even lawful immigrants toward unauthorized status, these shifts are creating widespread fear and confusion. What should immigrants realistically understand about the risk under the new public charge proposals? And what can legal or community group do to ensure accurate information reaches those who are afraid to seek help? Who wants to chime in?
Well, I could start by noting that in the first Trump administration made a big effort to use public charge to restrict the number of people who would be given green cards. Because the public charge requirement, this means that you have to have certain financial means to become a lawful permanent resident of the United States. And so the Trump administration tried to tighten that up in a way that was much more encompassing, much more a restriction than before. That was largely blocked in the courts. And it was still, I suppose, being fought about when the Biden administration came in. So, it would not surprise me to see this type of effort being resurrected. The other thing is that this is a consistent theme, I think, in this whole conversation, is that many people um, what the public charge rule said is that if you get certain kinds of public benefits, then that could make you ineligible for a green card. Many people decided it was too risky to file, even for the things that they were qualified for, right? And so there are people who didn't qualify, who did qualify for things and didn't ask for them. And so this is again the idea that if you block something, there will be three people who feel blocked, and that's part of, I think, what the point is. So I'm not sure. I can't predict what's going to happen, but I think that this is an area that the administration has had focus on since the year 2017.
There's a question in the chat I think you probably will address as well, Professor. Colombian-born Senator Bernie Moreno has announced legislation to end dual citizenship among Americans. What is the likelihood this bill will pass? Do you have the same trust that the Supreme Court will intervene here?
Some countries around the world do not allow dual citizenship, at least not in theory, although in practice, I think many people have dual citizenship from those countries as a matter of, their passports and things. But so there's, a certain amount of power in any country to limit the access to dual citizenship. I think that it's become too much of a part of the understanding of this country, of what it is, a nation of immigrants. And that, I think, continues in spite of what is going on in the White House. So I don't think it's going to, I don't think that will be successful. But here's one thing I think that it's important to understand about dual citizenship. I think a lot of the advocacy against dual citizenship says, well, you should have loyalty to one country. You should choose. You should not have attachment to both countries. But I think what is often overlooked is that this really makes for a weaker United States. And here's the reason. Because there's so much focus on the parent's generation and whether the parent has to choose between one country or another. But really, the real effect of dual citizenship is to assist with the integration of the children and the grandchildren. People can say, I belong here because my parents are citizens. And I think that is highly significant. I think the real judgment about dual citizenship has to be in the next generation and the generation after that. And the real tragedy of ending dual citizenship, or any country not having dual citizenship, is slowing down the way that the children of immigrants become part of that society.
Yes, thank you, Rishi. I want to close down with Andrea. I want to ask her, what does she want us in the media to understand about what dreamers and DACA recipients are facing today?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to close this off, and I mean, at the end of the day, when I close my laptop today and when I go home, these are still the same issues I have to deal with. It doesn't stop after this webinar. This is my life. I think sometimes within the media we can maybe forget that when we're asking questions to these individuals. So kind of remembering that the humanity in it is that these policies are affecting people. These are our lives. This is, this isn't just the political climate that we're in. This is something that affects thousands, millions of people. And so I just want journalists to remember that at the end of the day, this is exhausting. And to just kind of have compassion when we're speaking to people. When you tell our stories, I hope you highlight the humanity aspect of it and not just our status. We are students, we're caregivers, workers, leaders in our community, and we need policies that recognize our dignity. And your reporting matters. Your accuracy matters. The way you frame our stories has real consequences for how the public understands us. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea. And thank you, everyone of our panelists, for this very informative session, and to the journalists for so many questions we couldn't get to, but I hope you got some response.